Welcome back to Hannity as we continue with 2016 presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump. So the Benghazi report finally came in this week. To me, there's three separate issues. There's the before, during, and after. Now, there were over 600 requests for security before this attack. The Red Cross, Great Britain had pulled out of the area because it was unsafe. Those requests were all denied. Some went directly to Hillary Clinton. Then during the attack, if you were president, I really can't imagine. They were debating 4 hours in, even though they had a live shot of the firefight that was going on the ground. They're debating whether or not we can send our military in without getting Libya's permission, number one. And they kept having our military men and women change their clothes because they didn't want to offend the Libyans if our military went in to save American lives in uniform. How would you have, and then the lie afterwards, which I'll get to in a second, how would you have handled that if you were watching in real time Americans under fire at the American consul and an ambassador under fire?
Well, it would have never taken place because I think the key is the first little segment that you mentioned, or the first set that you mentioned, where they were sending, I heard, up to 600, like, help messages. I don't know how they were sending them, but they were there because they've all been
in the lead up to the attack.
For. Unlike her emails, unlike her 33,000 emails, they've all been accounted for. And I wonder what is on those emails having to do with Benghazi as an example. But to me, the most important segment is that first, that first grouping of 600 requests for help, that there's something going on here, we need help, and there was no response. Now, if you did that, there would have been, a skirmish. The ambassador, everybody, they would have been okay. Probably they would have stopped it. They would have stopped it before it started. Once it started, the timeline was tough, but you certainly would have sent somebody in anyway, regardless. It was probably too late by that time because it didn't take that long, and it would have taken people a long time to get there.
It went on 13 hours.
But I will tell you this. If you would have responded to the earlier requests for help, which should have been natural, who wouldn't have done that? Then there would have been no problem in the first place. So that would have been the thing. That was the biggest mistake of the group. The rest was just horribly handled, a horrible leadership. She's a horrible leader.
You would have debated whether
Bernie
or not,
Sanders.
Would you have debated the idea of asking permission to send in our military people? Would you have debated what clothes they wear? You would have sent them in, right?
Bernie Sanders said loud and clear that Hillary Clinton has bad judgment, okay? Now, who wouldn't have sent help after you got the first messages? Who wouldn't have sent help? Bernie Sanders said very loud and very clear that she has bad judgment. And you look at all of her calls. I mean, look at the calls she's made over the years. She has horrible judgment, including the fact that she voted for the war in Iraq, which I was opposed to, by the way, even though I was a civilian, nobody cared. But listen, she has bad judgment.
Who would not have sent
help when he's asking for help and we don't send it?
These are Americans under fire. Then afterwards, she writes her daughter. She talks to the Libyan president, the Egyptian prime minister. To her daughter, for example, she sent an email that says, 2 of our officers were killed in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group, the ambassador whom I handpicked, a young communications officer on temporary duty with a wife and 2 very young children. Very hard day, and I fear more of the same tomorrow. So she admitted to the Libyan president, the Egyptian prime minister, and her own daughter this was a terrorist attack. Simultaneously, she was telling the American people a different story, that it was not a terror attack, that it was a YouTube-related event that inspired this. It was spontaneous. They just happened to have mortars in their back pocket.
She lied. She lied. That's what she does. She lied.
Why do you think people don't pay as much attention to that?
Well, I think if you did it, if I did it, if somebody else did it, it would be a big deal. But she gets away with a lot of things. I mean, I have events. I'll tell you, so like the press is very dishonest. I have events that are so good, where such good things comes out of them, and some of the media try and make it look bad. And yet she gets away with things like this. And I'll be honest, the whole Benghazi thing, Sean, you talk about it, and a lot of the Fox people talk about it. But outside of Fox, Benghazi has never resonated. It's never been a big subject. The mainstream media has not covered it like it should have been covered, but it hasn't resonated. The word has
Americans died.
Hard to believe.
And it's hard to believe.
I know,
let me ask you this.
It has not been a big subject, relatively speaking, for the mainstream media. They have not covered it. It has not resonated. It should have, but it hasn't.
Loretta Lynch met with Bill Clinton while she's potentially is weighing an indictment against his wife. Now, she claims that, you know, she boarded the plane. She was on the plane with Bill Clinton for 30 minutes. They were talking about their grandchildren and sports. Is this an issue where you think the credibility, for example, if a criminal referral comes from the FBI, do you think the Attorney General needs to now recuse herself?
Well, when I first heard that yesterday afternoon, I actually thought they were joking. I thought the people that told me was, you know, I said, no way. It's just no way that's going to happen. And it happened. And I'm flabbergasted by it. I think it's amazing. I've never seen anything like that before.